In this module, we're going to look at small order implementation case study ideas. So far, in the last couple of modules, to summarize, we've agreed on a few things. First of all, small order is a huge opportunity for most wholesale distributors. Secondly, it's a complex one, so it's best if we divide it into different subcategories and deal with them each in a different way. I've chosen 4. I've given you some guidelines for dealing with each one so far in the past couple of modules. Now we try to get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of some of the case examples. So let's take these opportunities in the following order. First of all, we're going to talk about big volume, small order guys. Then we'll go small accounts, small orders. Then fragmented lines and customers segments. And finally, our own fault. When it comes to small order offenders, with the big offenders, as I mentioned in the last module, it's a team sell. You go out, honcho to honcho talks total selling cost to you, but you have to look at your total purchasing cost. We both have an opportunity, on top of which you've got stock out, downtime opportunities. The sales guy can help you rethink reorder points, reorder quantities, so that we both can win on a more wholesome basis. And that's the pitch you give them. Now the rep right away has a couple of big concerns. Let's look at this slide. First of all, they say, wait a minute, if I'm receiving full normal incentives for what I'm doing, why do I want to do more? Why do I want to redo the customer's purchase stock system and then risk losing compensation on some of the guys that rebel? Can't I just kind of put my head in the sand and hope that things will get better? And also I have a big concern about accounts where I've got my number on them and I don't really call on them, maybe once a year, twice a year, but I actually really don't call on them, but I get credit for what they're doing, so that's a little bit of compensation. It's not a lot, but I don't want to lose it. I mean, it's all part of, getting paid for what I'm doing. So the big question is, what do you do? I would suggest a couple things. In the short term, you guarantee income. So you say, look, salespeople, we're going to go after the small order problem. Whatever you're making historically, that's what you're going to make for the next 12 months. But long term, if you're going to make more, and presumably we all want to make more, it's going to be, with the new small order economic reality built into it in some way. Now, some of the ways we can deal with it, we can take the small accounts that you're really not calling on that often or at all, reassign them to the house, figure out if they had continued buying what they're buying for the next 12 months, what would you have made on it, give you a check right up front. So it's kind of a one-time buyout program. And then you've got the leisure time slack to focus with the team on the target and franchise accounts that happen to be your territory to blow the roof off of those guys. So in a sense, the company will take one financial step backwards, so the rep and the company can take 3-4 steps forward. Also, it's possible to consider, if there's quite a small order problem, kind of a transitional compensation program where you give, in a sense, a spiff or an incentive for salespeople to try to figure out how to get customers to rethink reorder points, reorder quantities, and build average order size as a byproduct. Let's look at this math slide. In this math slide, what we're assuming is that let's assume the average salesman has an average order size equal to the company's average, which is $86 in gross margin. And let's assume, for simple math, the total sales compensation package works out being 20% of the margin. So on an incremental order basis, 20% of $86 in gross margin would be $17.20 in compensation. What if, and you see these 2 circles, we had 2 plug figures. We said from now on, every order that goes through the business, I don't care if it's large or small, it's going to get a $25 order charge socked to it, giving a net reduced margin figure of $61. But we're going to move the compensation rate from 20% up to 28%. So on an average order, the sales is going to make the same amount of money. Now what's going to happen on a territory by territory basis is a salesman who has an average order size that's greatly over the company's average order size will actually make more money doing nothing. Somebody who averages what the company averages is going to make the same money, but a guy with a small order territory that is below the company's will actually make less money. That's okay though, because we're going to guarantee their salary for the next X months, but they'll only make more on the new program. Now what happens in the meantime is every salesman, I don't care if you're big, medium, or small, has an incentive. If they can help a customer clue into their total procurement cost and how they're killing themselves with transactional paperwork or stock out emergency buys, which is downtime, labor, productivity problems for the customer. Every time they can get a customer to consolidate 2 orders into one, they're in a sense saving 28% of $25, which is, I don't know, about $6 or something. So it's almost a spiff for every time you can pull off an order consolidation. Now, some people might say, Bruce, we did your ranking report analysis and we're shocked. Our whole business is small orders. In other words, it's just too big a problem. If we tried to change it, we wouldn't have a business left. I mean, we don't have much of one right now because they're all small orders. That's why we're working our tail feathers off and making no money. In that case, you may consider converting your business to a different business model. Make it a cash and carry kind of model. I've seen this happen particularly in the candy and tobacco distribution business and janitorial supplies, where lots of little customers that could come down and pick stuff up, pick it themselves in the warehouse, pay cash. Seen it happen in food equipment, kitchen accessory kind of stuff. So you may decide to just shift your whole model. I mean, there's a saying that's one man's meat is another man's poison, or vice versa. One man's poison, another man's meat. So if that's your whole business, think, how can I restructure my business to lower my costs, get the customer to do a little bit more of the work, and maybe make something work out of it. A second big pushback concern is, well, if we strip away small accounts from the salespeople, and we take the rest of the small accounts are just house accounts, and we send a letter out to them, that doesn't mean they're not going to keep calling their friend up on the inside sales desk and trying to sneak small orders through. And that's true. What you have to do is send a letter out to everybody, put an A to Z list at the inside sales, so when these people call up and say, hey, Louie, you're my good old buddy, want to give you another small order, they don't say it that way. Louie says, Mr. Aardvark, I see where you're here right at the top of the list. You received the letter about our new small order policy. Oh, I didn't receive the letter. So Louie reads the letter to Mr. Aardvark. Then Mr. Aardvark says, but Louie, I'm small enough space to store this, whatever. Come on, just sneak one through for Louie. And that's where Louie would say, I'd like to, but they now have a new audit system where I'd get caught anyway, so I really don't have any choice. So it's sort of like and have an audit system, but not to sort of play gotcha with the inside salespeople, just to give them an excuse for I have structural spine behind me, so if I had my choice I would, but of course I can't. And if you do that, then you'll find that after a couple of efforts, these guys will finally cave, and they'll order half as often, twice as much, they'll pay extra services fees, that sort of thing, or they'll leave and go paralyze the competition, or they'll leave and go find a cash and carry kind of guy who's got a different business model that maybe they can make money off of them. If you look at this next slide here, fragmenting lines, customer segments. In some businesses where you cut material to size, for example, in the installation of resilient flooring or countertops, Wilson Art, Formica, those kind of people, little contractors will order a small piece that's got to be cut to size, and the amount of margin you can put in a piece of material just isn't enough to cover the total transactional costs. So that's when you may have to say, what? We may have to do some accommodations. For a very large retail account, they may order 5, 6, 10, 15 cuts a day. We need to just leave an invoice open for them, and at some point at the end of the day, cut it off, process all of those on the swing shift, and deliver the next morning, so we have a big payload per stop of the truck, per ticket, and so forth. When it's people coming down and picking stuff up, you may have to say, well, here's a minimum order, but there's also, below a certain amount, there's a service fee, handling fee, that sort of thing, because you can't load enough margin in it to cover service fees, handling fees, and delivery fees. Sometimes distributors will gather add-on lines. You're calling on a general buyer, and they say, gee, I've got, I also buy coffee. Could you put coffee beans and filters and things like that in, because I'm buying office supplies and other things too. And you're tempted to do that, but you may find out that most of your customers have somebody who does the coffee that's different than the guy who's buying the office supplies. So it fragments, and what you're generating is little orders to a specialty kind of buyer. So another example would be a sanitary supplier, industrial paper distributor trying to deliver towels and tissue to a gas station. Well, they don't use that much. It's a small order problem, and the guy who's delivering all the gas and oil and so forth should have those items too as a one-stop shop in assortment. So that needs to be bundled with the main, commodity, as opposed to fragmenting and coming out of your business and being a small order. So you want to look at those kinds of things. Sometimes I've seen cases where a whole customer segment needs to be just eliminated. I was involved with a company where they sold security hardware, locksmith supplies, and they were selling hundreds of hardware stores who buy 100 key blanks, along with 50,000 other items from a hardware wholesaler. So why would they buy 100 key blanks from the security hardware distributor when they could just get it from the normal one-stop shop guy? And the answer is price, and they didn't pay their bills. So you'll find that if it's easy enough to buy the same stuff from the main guy and they decide to split and buy it from the specialty guy, the reason is the specialty guy is given a low price and they go slow on the payment, because you wouldn't go slow on your main supplier because you need that guy to take care of the rest of your store. So now you've created a small order, at low prices to boot and not getting paid. So you just summarily don't do business with those kinds of segments. The last category of self-inflicted stuff was, we already mentioned some guidelines in 3.9, which is things like don't back order, small order, branch shipments. So let's go on to the summary points here for this section. First of all, solving the small order problem does involve work and stress, but there's huge upside. Second point is, what's the alternative? If you're marginally profitable because you've got all this losing business in your mix, do you think by growing the mess bigger, you're going to do better? No, you're just going to grow the bad stuff too. So who's interested in working harder to try to break even? Third point is, we have to reposition the sales force toward selling bigger orders to bigger customers on a system basis. And the rest of the accounts, we have to do more. They have to do more on their own or start to pay service fees. Thank you. This section deals with how do we unfreeze how we sign accounts to either salespeople, telemarketing, the house, etc. If you think about it, in the past number of modules, we've kind of bumped up against this problem of reassigning accounts. We saw it in segmenting customers and serving them differently and creating a telemarketing territory where there might not have been one before. When it comes to super servicing franchise and target accounts involving team selling, that's quite a bit more additional expense, than maybe the traditional way of selling. So maybe we have to make compensation adjustments for that. And certainly in the small order modules, we saw that there were reasons that sales guys would have pushbacks on that. So I've often heard when I talk about some of these productivity plays, gee, the sales force won't stand for those plays, so I'm not going to do it. Well, you have to ask, what's the rest of the story behind that concern or complaint? Let's look at a couple slides. First of all, I think what I'm hearing is retaliation. If I try to put this program in, some of my sales guys, and probably the best one if I have one, because they're the most marketable to the competition, would leave to go work for the competition and take a big chunk of their business with them. And that may be the case for a lot of the bottom 90% of the distributors out there, because if you think about it, their whole differentiating edge is really the salesperson. They don't have basic service brilliance. They haven't team sold to create a powerful ropes between important customers to keep profits growing and going with the right accounts. So in a miserable kind of way, the sales guy is the edge. But you have to ask yourself, what is any rep's future on this horse? I mean, they're riding a glue factory nag. In the long run, they can't do any better than the nag they're on. The second one is, slide or perspective is, what do I, the sales rep, want? I think it's realistic that a sales rep would have these conditions. I want to keep and improve my most profitable guys. I don't want to take any pay cuts, and I certainly want the chance to make more. I don't need to do more work and have more uncertainty for the same pay or less. Yeah, and I'd like the horse I'm riding to be secretariat. I mean, I think those are obviously difficult collective demands to meet, but I think that they're all reasonable. So I've come up with a number of suggestions in past modules. To summarize, I've suggested that if and when we reassign, particularly small accounts, from salespeople to telemarketing or the house or whatever for different kind of selling treatment, that there's a buyout plan. Simplistically, you may find that the bottom 50% of a salesperson's territory will generate only about 10% of their margin dollars. And in theory, if they were calling on a minimal amount of times, it should take about 30% of their time. So that's a lousy return on their invested time. Spend 30% of your time for only 10% of your margin dollars, not a good deal. So they tend to slack those a bit, which is fine. But the problem is these small accounts still are sucking on the horse, which cannot take care of the important accounts because they're so busy with zillions of little minnows calling in and paralyzing the order processing function. So what we do is we say, look, you pick the account sales guy. We'll write you a check out for 12 months of what it would buy it out. So in a sense, for 30% of your time, I'm only going to pay 10% of your cost. That's a pretty good deal. But most importantly, let's focus on the big guys, team sell them, crack them wide open, make stuff happen, so we can all move 3 steps ahead. The additional reassignment team selling issues, though, are, as you see in this slide, penetrating big accounts is tough. If we pay straight commission, we harvest our veteran digging power, because if I'm on straight commission, the idea of going in the bush trying to find, 2 birds there for one I already have in my hand, I'm going to become 120% focused on not losing the business I have, as opposed to speculating time, energy, and taking my off, good solid business for which I get commissions on. We've already talked about team partnering, taking additional resources. A third and fourth one have to do with kind of ego problems. I think all human beings kind of like to have a magic act. In other words, my job security is I know accounts and control accounts that you don't know, so that gives me a little bit of perceived power. If people come out and team sell the account, the salesperson becomes less important because you have a big rope, many strands. It's not as fragile as just one salesperson strand controlling the account with one buyer, for example. And there's some ego concerns. What if the account is reassigned to telemarketing and they double the volume just because they're showing up via the phone twice a month instead of once or 3 times a year or something, as the sales rep used to do? And I think the answer to 3 and 4 is, come on, we're looking at a 2% growth per year situation. We're in living dead mode. So I'm not really into control and ego. I'm just into trying to help everybody get on the high-performance distribution economic train. So, thinking about some more additional guidelines, there are multiple reasons, I think, for abandoning, if this has not already been done, sort of straight commission kind of plans and going to a salary plus a growth bonus plan. I have a couple slides that sort of give an example of this. On this first one, what we're going to do is we're going to transition as possible to the point where basically we're paying new and old reps a salary that reflects their next best opportunity in life, which may be working for our biggest head-to-head competitor in the same town. And this salary doesn't have anything to do necessarily with historic gross margin dollars and accounts that they happen to be assigned to. But whatever that historic base is, we're going to come up with a target figure that incorporates what we think the growth rate for the territory is going to be this next year, plus product inflation in the line, and that'll come with some sort of target number. So let's assume, for simple math, last year a territory had $100,000 in margin, and we think that the territory is going to grow 2%, 3%, inflation's 2, so 5. So target becomes $105,000. If a sales guy comes in at that, we'll say, congratulations, you got paid a salary to maintain business, and that's what you did. However, if they can't come in above that figure, they could get bonus dollars. It's very possible in down years. I'm doing this video in the middle of 2001, and there are a lot of distributors that are in recession mode right now. The target could be 98% of what last year, and you could be in bonus dollars. It could be 92% of last year. There's some high-tech companies where they could say, if you could come at 65% of what we did last year, you're in the bonus dollars. So, we're looking at reality as far as growth or contraction in the economy here. Then, once we have a target, we do the math as follows. Hypothetically, you see the 99 results. The base is 100,000. 99 target is 105, and the salesperson came at 145,000, or $40,000 of gross margin difference. I call that often the delta gross margin. Then the bonus calculation can get as tricky or simple as you want. You may have accounts that are traditional, old-fashioned, full service, and they may get 50% of that delta gross margin. There's a lot of teamwork involved. Maybe up front we agree that if we can blow it wide open, the guy's going to get 25% of the delta. If it's a bid strict price thing, but you need a sales guy to facilitate in some way, maybe it's as little as 10%. This is you could just have one plan or three plans. It doesn't matter. That's up for each company to decide. But in this hypothetical case, the guy would get a $14,400 bonus. Now, what's interesting about the program is, in 2000, the salary stays the same. Maybe there's a cost of living adjustment. The new base is $145,000. So if this salesperson wants to go out and get another $14,400 bonus, they may have to get as much as another $40,000 delta G gross margin on top of their target. Now, also what's interesting is if a salesperson says, wait a minute, I have a bunch of accounts that are mature. I've penetrated them as much as I can get out of them, so it's full-time maintenance. Can I reassign those to telemarketing people or junior salespeople who could be really good maintainers but not good penetrators? And the answer is yes. If you reassign them, the history goes with it, which reduces the target and everything else, but the salesman's still getting paid the same salary. Some guys might say, why would you ever want any maintenance accounts at all? Assign them all away, so enormous free time just to focus on upside accounts, assuming you're going to pay me my normal going salary. And the answer is, yep, that's what we're going to do. Now, this could set up different scenarios. I'll give you an extreme one. Again, it's kind of by example. I know I was involved with a client where they had one sales guy in Southern California who looked like Southern California gold rush. The guy had gold chains, he had a Porsche, he had the special hair blowed, perfect, sculpted hairdo, whatever. And the guy just loved blowing down doors. And all he really wanted to do was call in Mongo accounts with honchos, because the honchos, with the protocol effect, would get him in there. He'd make a list of 10,000 names and just super obsess on these accounts. And he'd crack them, and he'd hang on to them for 2, 3, 4 years. But at some point, the volume would start to level off, so the year-to-year delta wasn't there anymore. It was just growing with the economy and the product inflation, so then he'd reassign it. At the same company, there was a fellow who was an ex-inside salesperson who was, he's a craftsman, a very introverted fellow, not your natural salesperson at all, but customers loved him on the phone, great technical guy, and he was the ultimate maintainer. Couldn't really probably make a cold call if he had to. It would be just to have a nervous breakdown. But if you took this fellow in to Mongo accounts, handed them off to him, he'd maintain them meticulously. So these guys became a team. One guy would penetrate, hang on it to the max, and then hand it off to the super farmer type of thing. What I found, in most situations like this, the guys can do a little bit of target account penetration work, and they tend to lean a lot on sales managers or designated managers who are can go in, shake down an account big time, get a lot of information, help the salesman come with a summary list of a lot of stuff to follow up on, and the sales guys bird dog it like crazy. So that's typically what happens. So let's look at a summary slide here. The key points here are if management and sales reps have mistrust historically and can't move, we're all, salespeople included, stuck in living dead mode. We're stuck on glue factory nag. We're stuck in 2% growth. The sales reps, managers, nobody can outperform the ecosystem in the long run. So we're not doing anything to improve the ecosystem. Secondly, if the sales reps have any downside at all, that's got to be taken away. So you just have upside possibilities. They may be at a plateau for a period of time before they make money in the new model, but that's a key point. And then the third one is we've really got to have the flexibility to match up the right selling strategies and styles and terms to each type of strata and type of customer if we're going to really get paid exactly for what we're doing and give the customer exactly what they want. This module on making service retention economics work could be the most important conceptual module we have in the whole video series. And it basically sets up the entire section 4 part of the video on measuring, achieving, selling perfect service. So let's get to it. Here's the problem. In a mature market where your customer base in total is growing 1, 2, 3% a year, if you want to grow 8, 12, 15% a year, I'll give you two ways to sell. One is to go out there and bang on doors and try to prospect and get new business, while out the back door you've got old customers quietly leaving because you haven't been paying the right kind of attention to them. Or another way is kind of a National Football League defensive strategy where you think, all right, we're going to go out there and play the game with great execution, and because we're never going to make mistakes, we're not going to throw any interceptions, we're not going to drop any fumbles, but we know our competitors are, we're going to win the game on positive turnovers, or in the distribution business, we're going to win on customer defection rates. If only 1, 2, 3% of our customers are quietly defecting and going to the competition while they're losing 10% to us, we're growing at 7% a year. To get this idea across, let's look at the most sensational customer defection stats I've seen, which are from the grocery industry. In this particular slide, you see that the average grocery store loses 25% of their business per year. But that's because people die and move away, and they pick up 11% because new people are born and they buy the Pampers and the Pablum and the whatever, and new people move into those houses. So that's a net loss of 14%. Now imagine if one grocery store was so neat, so clean, so well lit, so user-friendly, so nice and cheerful, etc., that they only lost 4%, had a net loss of 4%. So they're losing 4% to the competition, with the competition sending 14% to them. They're growing 10% a year in a very mature market. Now, how could you stop your quiet defections? Because you have them, but you just don't know it. Usually when customers get upset, they don't say, I'm leaving now. They just quietly start calling somebody else first and maybe you second. So instead of getting 80% of the business, you're only getting 20. I don't consider that a retained account, if you will. You could run activity trend reports where every month or every quarter you could say, let's take the last 6 months and look at the volume versus 6 months before that and come up with ratios and rank them from high to low. And the people at the top of the report are growing nicely, the people at the bottom of the report are contracting, and you have to say why. But that still is kind of a report where you're measuring how many horses got out of the barn this month or this quarter. And let's catch them before they get over the horizon. It's still a remedial type of thing as opposed to a preventative thing. Maybe a little bit more preventative is if there should ever be a screw-up or you hear a cross tone from a customer, you have to say, no, wait a minute, what's going on here? Let's make this right. And right there on the spot, you do what is called a heroic recovery. Now, we'll look at that in Module 4.10 later on. But at least that's trying to nip the problem in the bud when you see those kind of opportunities. Generally, salespeople do a lot of nipping in the bud. They tend to be kind of firefighters. A customer will grumble, they get out their fire hose and run to the scene of the crime. And I've had distributors say, oh man, I got the best firefighting salespeople in the business. And I'm thinking, well, why don't you pay your frontliners a bit more to get more, or keep people longer, invest in them to make them better so they don't create fires to begin with? Again, preventative medicine as opposed to remedial medicine. And when it comes to preventative and remedial economics, let's look at this next slide. When you hear about, I'm going to use some different themes here. If you think about medicine, they talk about preventative medicine, they talk about a remedy for a problem you have, or you could have surgery, big crisis. Detect the disease very early, nip it in the bud, all the way to, big crisis type of thing. You could use the same vocabulary. You could anticipate a problem, you could react to it, or you could wait till, there's a big fire or crisis. What are the cost relationships? I know that if you think of a stitch in time saves 9, that motto suggests that 1 ounce of prevention is worth about 9 ounces or 9 units of remedy. Speaking of ounces, 1 ounce of prevention is worth a pound or 16 ounces of cure. I don't know, but I do know that to be have come up with preventative solutions in your business is going to pay huge dividends in the long run as opposed to being the reactive or surgery mode. So the best preventative medicine is to practice basic service brilliance. Never screw up to begin with to give your customers a chance to be upset in any way. So you have to do the heroic recoveries or the firefighting activity. Now, Section 4 is going to be totally dedicated to how do we achieve, sell, et cetera, basic service brilliance. But for that to happen, the frontliners are going to have to be totally engaged in wanting to make it happen, and we're really going to have to understand the economics of service retention process. And so there are two key slides I want to go through here. I know it's busy, but hang with me. In this slide, you look at the box on the left-hand side, where you say, you know, if we pay more to hire better people and put these people in a high-performance environment, or we pay more money and we create a high-performance environment to induce, you know, hidden talent, in a sense, turn on or become engaged, then we have step one. We have happy employees. If the employees are happy, they stay. That's point 2, employee retention. Look over on the right-hand side. You see that circle, that little feedback circle A? If people stay, the longer they stay, the happier they tend to be in one sense because they know what they're doing. The better you are at something, the more you like it. So if you're a black belt, 10th degree, if you're a scratch golfer, you love golf. If you have to cheat like crazy, shoot a 36 over, whatever, slow down the whole foursome, you hate it. So if you're good, then if people stay and get better and better and better, collectively they're making fewer mistakes, so service just kind of improves all by itself with employee retention. If service improves, morale goes up because of the absence of upset customers and upset salespeople, etc. But to improve service is one thing. To make it distinctively brilliant compared to the competition, that isn't going to happen unless every employee knows exactly what the service formula is, rethinking ourselves, our systems, cross-training, and so forth. A lot of stuff that we're going to cover in Section 4. If we can do that, then Step 4 happens. We have customers who say to us, you know what, you guys saved my rear end. You guys are the greatest. You guys grow my business kind of stuff. If that happens, that's the biggest motivational thing you can have for outside, inside salespeople going. You're out of the motivation business. Managers no longer trying to pacify upset customers and upset sales personnel. They're stroking each other. They're so happy. Then Step 5 happens. The customers just unknowingly just start giving you more and more business because it's just too easy. They may even say, you're so good, let's get married and routinize the relationship and have an integrated sole supply deal. They may say, hey, it's competitive, but they're going to say, here's last look, could you be more competitive? They will concede, a price premium because they know that your total procurement cost value is great. All of these things help you start growing 2 to 5 times faster than the industry and making a lot more money because you don't have turnover costs, you don't have screw-up costs, you don't have morale costs, you have better order size economics, you get free testimonial advertising from your happy customers. All these things impact the bottom line. So that you get a slide that looks like the next one, where you go out and spend a little time and energy trying to crack an account and give them your best service value proposition. You get a toehold, that's the little red box, initial sales. They then go, hey, you guys are so great. They just naturally start to not only give you more sales, but in a sense they give you last look and a little bit more. You start to have better operational cost savings because you'll have larger average order sizes per stop of the truck, more routinization. 0 errors, of course, are big operational savings. And then the referral advertising kicks in. Now, you're not going to see these economics on P&Ls that you have in your company. The only place you're going to see this stuff is where numbers are going like that, and you just really don't understand the source of the profit power. So I have to point out that in mature markets, going out to prospect for new business, that's tough and it's expensive. But if you try to do it with mediocre service, even if you get business, you're not going to maintain it and hold it and grow it like you saw in that last graph. So service retention economics are huge. It's just enormously difficult to pull off. If you think of FedEx, their motto is people, service, profits. That really is a simplified version of that complicated service retention model we looked at, where you start with happy employees at the top, great services in the middle, and we're making good money at the bottom of the chart. But we're going to have to rethink all of our personnel systems, et cetera, to start to really make this work. I want to close with some frontliner case studies to look at. In a book called Real Heroes and Not a CEO Among Them, the authors went to national service firms and said, who is a frontliner that can make big impact on your business, and then who's the best one you can think of in that category. For grocery stores, it was the produce department, and they went to Vaughn's and they said, hey, Wally Bajorquez. And they go out to Wally and they find out that Wally is one of these chipper, happy, smile on his face kind of guys. He's got a lot of energy. He loves memorizing every single customer's name. He greets 90% of the customers by their names. Oh, hi, Mrs. Jones. Hi, Mr. Merrifield. How are you? Oh, hey, Wally, good to see you. He's got 6 tricks that he does to really showcase the produce a little bit better, make it look a little bit better, and so forth. When the case writers asked Wally, do you ever have customers that say to you that because your produce department is so good, they've switched from the store across the street or down the street to Vaughn's? Oh, yeah. 1 or 2 times a week, somebody will say, I used to shop whatever, but now I shop here because your produce department's so good. And the second question was, Wally, have you ever had customers say, Wally, if it wasn't for you and your produce department, I would have left this place because I'm really honked off at the guy in the fish department or the butcher or one of the other personnel in the organization. He says, well, yeah, that does happen, and I'm a little embarrassed because there's nothing I can do about the other departments. So the case writers did the math. They said, wait a minute. If Wally is winning 1 new customer a week and he's saving a defection per week, 2 per week, and the average guy comes in and spends $100, what's the margin, what's the profit before interest and tax per year? You see the figure there, $624 in profit before interest and tax per customer. And if Wally works 30 years in this organization, he has a lifetime value of $18,720,000. And the sad thing about Wally was just when he got everything going, he knew all his customers, he'd get switched again because he was part of a union who, not knowing anything about service economics, just focusing on their people and what their people wanted, said with seniority, people want to work at stores closer to their home during the normal shift. They don't want to work the swing shift, weekend shifts, whatever. So about every 6 to 9 months, Wally would get shifted to a different store or a different shift where he'd miss most of his customers. So this is a case where the union needs to say, wait a minute, if this is what matters and this is what grows the business and grows more employees that will be our union, we're on the same side of the table in this issue. So here's the question. How many customer frontliners in a distribution business touch the customer and sooner or later are going to have a chance to perhaps make a little bit of impact that has a lifetime value? That's what this is all about. Thanks. In this module, we're going to talk about rethinking and how all employees have to help co-create sort of revamped personnel systems. A big assumption, I think, is, and maybe it's a big problem too, is that a big percent of high performance is, in a sense, how we pick people. I mean, to be a little bit crude, if you have a donkey, you can't win the Derby with the donkey. You do need a thoroughbred. That doesn't mean that the thoroughbred is going to perform and win the Derby, but at least it increases the odds that you're going to do it. But even if you get a decent, person who's got a good work ethic and good intentions, there are a number of systems that we're going to have to help us be who we want to be. By example, we all know health is the first wealth, and we all know what good health habits are. But it's tough to do it on our own. That's why we tend to create a health culture around us and health systems around us that give us the discipline to be who we want. If there are no sweet snacks around the house, it's easier to not snack, for example. So if we looked at all the systems chronologically that we would need to support a high-performance environment, here's a partial list. For starters, we need a pay scheme that's going to attract a lot more candidates from which we can funnel down and really pick potentially what we think is a thoroughbred who's got the aptitude for doing the kind of job that we need filled. When the people show up, we have to have a system for increasing the odds that we do pick a best thoroughbred with the best aptitude for the job we're looking for. Point 3, the day we hire them, we have to put them into some sort of boot camp orientation program where for 20 days they're really getting totally up to speed on the ABCs of financial management realities, ABCs of capitalism, a lot of stuff that you've seen in this video, plus names of all the personnel, how to log on and do email, how to stay in touch, nomenclature for the industry, those sort of things. Once they get through orientation, then there's going to have to be some sort of ongoing continuous improvement education so we can continue to promote from within. And we have the cross-trained flexibility we need to take care of surges of orders coming through the system, for example. We have to have other measurement systems around that constantly sort of are asking us, are you doing what has to be done every day? And on top of that, how can we continue to improve? We have to have a system for weeding the garden. Periodically, people, no matter how we try and how creative we are and so forth, they're just not going to fit in this lifetime. So they need to be weeded. But when we do it, we have to make sure it's fair, it's careful, it's thoughtful, there's due process. And then we have to kind of go back and learn and refine all the systems. In other words, we might say, gee, this person who we have to weed, how did they originally get hired? And let's go back and review the hiring system. So there's a circular pattern to this set of systems, and we need a binder with a tab for each one of these things, and we have to start building these systems together. Now, frontliners might say, well, isn't this human resource stuff? Why should I be concerned? And the answer is, well, first of all, we all need these systems to become who we want to be. To get premium productivity, we're going to need this kind of support. Secondly, if you really buy into this, high-performance distribution economics, you're certainly not going to want either old or new bad apples to hold back the rest of the bunch and for you to have to cross-subsidize them, because you're not going to have the time or the energy or desire to want to do that. Another thing is I'm a big believer in a high-performance environment. Everybody's got to buy in to what's going on. So that's why frontliners have to understand the systems. They have to buy in. They have to co-create them. I'm also a big believer in having frontliners teach new people, because first-time teachers actually learn more than first-time students, and we'll come back to that. But for right now, I want to just do highlight comments on each one of these personnel systems that I've touched upon. Now, mind you, I've got a 6-hour audio tape that covers these systems in enormous detail, and I'm trying to do this in the next 6 minutes. So I'm just going to touch across the tops of some of these things. As far as achiever pay strategies, just remember the marketplace sets the low end of the wage for a given job niche, and it's up to us to figure out how to maximize gross margin dollar annually generated per warm body, value added per employee, to set the high end of the wage zone. In one case, a distribution company I work with, they would hire warehouse people and drivers at 110 to 140% of the going wage for those jobs in town, put them through a brutal learn and earn certification program to get them up to 150% of the going wage. At inside sales, they'd hire them in at 110 to 120, put them through a very tough long haul learn and earn to get them to 130. Administrative people, clerical people, accounting people, audit people kind of folks, they'd hire them in 105 to 115, do a learn and earn to get them up to 120. Outside salespeople were on a salary plus bonus, but their bonus, they had a shot at making good money. And the executives actually got paid below industry average, but they had bonuses and a lot of stock, and since they want to become a high-performance profit machine, their stock would appreciate rapidly. Not that they could spend it or borrow against it, but someday they might have a liquidity event. Now, when you look at that, you say, well, okay, fine. If we pay more, certainly a lot more people would show up, but how do we funnel it down to get to very few people and pick the right person? I am going to skip over that. I will defer you to some articles in an implementation guide or an audio tape product I have that's almost for free. The next system was boot camp, where you go into a 20-day or one month kind of camp, where in the mornings you tend to be learning stuff, memorizing, taking tasks. The afternoon you tend to go and work with different people, staple yourself to an order and go through a process, go out and visit target accounts, franchise accounts to see who we're servicing and what they tell you about the company and so forth. So you're getting big picture understanding. And the idea is that if people have skeletons of understanding, if they have the vocabulary, then day in, day out, they constantly can assimilate much more information if they don't have those learning tools to begin with. Also, like boot camp, it's kind of the last step of the hiring process. When I say boot camp, during the Vietnam War, if you got drafted to boot camp, 40% or so of the people were sent home because they're physically unfit for the Army. but you didn't get any GI Bill of rights and benefits till you got through boot camp. So it's a probationary hire, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. The remaining steps, once you get into the day in, day out operation, wherever you are, you can go through a learn and earn certification to, in a sense, increase your flexibility value, your responsibility value, your accuracy value, all these things, to make yourself more valuable. And then what are the systems that we should put around us to constantly remind us that are we doing the best, are we doing what has to be done? Daily sales service metrics, come hell or high water, we've got to make these numbers happen. Oh my gosh, a surge of orders is coming through, can we have 100% on-time delivery? That kind of real-time data forces us, feeds us to do what we have to do. We're constantly looking at financial numbers, we're looking at ranking reports between profit centers, who's the best, who's the worst, how can the worst learn from the best kind of thing. So those kinds of reports are necessary. I'll come back to this in section 5. And then we need a little bit of educational stimulation. Presumably this video is giving you some. We also need praising systems, and I'll talk about that in section 5. And in this last slide here, if I can get it up, the last system we talked about is a weeding system. So people that just don't fit in, how are we going to weed them? To a certain degree, in high-performance environments, you'll find that people tend to weed themselves. Again, because the numbers are everywhere, there's no place to hide, and there's a lot of peer pressure. It's kind of like geese in formation. If they're going at 80 miles an hour, they're big birds, a lot of wind resistance, they're in tight V formation, they're honking like crazy, they're communicating, they're saying speed up, slow down, whatever, so this whole thing will work, and we'll take turns being the head goose so we can fly 70% further at the speed than if we try to do it all by ourselves. And that's where the biking guys, the Tour de France, learned how to draft. So at any rate, some people weed themselves, but that failing, we have to have a system that's going to allow us to intervene, say the performance is not good, what are we going to do to try to get you back up to a certain level? And that failing, write them up, due process, and out they go. And the final slide here is talking about key points for this piece, which is, we have to start a binder, we have to put tabs on it, we have to start to compile what are we already doing on an informal or formal basis for these different chronological steps. But we have to rethink all of these things in light of trying to achieve perfect service, giving our customers what they want, create a high-performance environment. And 100% of us not only have to revere these systems and support them because they're going to help us be what we want to be, but we have to co-create them. We have to buy in. So we're going to talk about a few specific opportunities in upcoming modules. Thanks. In this module, we're going to focus on one of the personnel systems that I just glossed over in the last module. In the last module, as you may recall, I highlighted a chronological set of personnel systems for a high-performance environment. Once you're in a business, a high-performance in business, the business asks you, in a sense, to continue to improve yourself. So I guess the question is, historically, maybe most people were not banging on their boss's door saying, hey, here's how I educationally want to improve myself, and here's how the company can help, and give progress reports on how you're doing. But that's kind of what this module is all about. First, I want to give you some learning terms. When you watch this video, let's consider that an educational event. Your brain is being confronted with ideas. I'm surfacing assumptions, often unspoken, and pointing out that they may be flawed, and I'm trying to give you other assumptions that I'm hoping you'll embrace, because if you do, then the real learning begins. Learning begins when you try to actually do something, because it never works the way it's supposed to. And so that's when you have to really find out not just the science of something, but the art of making it happen. And there are going to be some good mistakes, and we'll talk about what good mistakes are in section 5. So given that terminology, let's now check some assumptions about learning. First of all, if the company is going to get better in total, it's really the sum of the individual parts. If each individual isn't toning up and getting better and more flexible and so forth, then the overall corporate body is not doing that either. If you try to get your body in shape, day one, everything is equally out of shape. And to a certain degree, you can't go any faster than the weakest link. And so you've got to condition everything in a measured, paced way. But in a sense, we all have to grow together there. Second assumption is education. Getting confronted with new ideas is the first step of successful change. The third assumption is we can't achieve excellence and then start promoting from within if everybody isn't doing at least 1 and 2 and then learning how to learn and trying and following their face forward towards new levels of personal mastery. Now, if you buy into these assumptions, we could have some conflicts with past company educational behavior. I'm going to review some common observations I've seen in wholesale distribution in this next slide. First of all, education is not a budget or expense line for most companies. If you said, well, where in your P&L is education? It's not a line item. There isn't a budget for it. If you say, well, does education happen? Sure, it happens. But 90% of it tends to be when suppliers come in and want to sponsor a sales meeting, in a sense, brainwash people about their product knowledge. If there is some company-sponsored education, it tends to be top-down. You know, here's this program for everybody. This video is sort of that. So it's top-down. Here, you know, eat this education whether you like it or not, kind of thing. But you have to ask, on the flip side, where's the bottom-up initiative energy of, hey, I want to learn some more about this, that, or whatever. Another thing is annual reviews. Annual reviews are more of a legal cover-your-ass phenomenon. They are, hey, what did you learn this year? What do you want to learn next year? Although we pay lip service to it, it happens so infrequently, it really is not about learning. It's just about legal formalities. And then when we say to distributor clients, well, why aren't you investing in education? They'll say, well, I can't afford it. It would raise expectations. If I educate these people, they'd be better at something that would make them more employable, and they're likely to jump ship quicker. And of course, these are all things that add to the reason that 90% of the distributors are in the bottom 90%. So as I go ahead and continue to promote and expand and outline my sort of revolutionary high-performance economic scenario here through all these modules, you start to realize that I'm saying, no, we're going to pay more to get more, but expect more, and then we're going to, on top of that, forward invest. And people say, well, where am I going to get the money for the upfront wages? Where am I going to get the money for the upfront education? Look at our puny little profit line. That's why we need the productivity plays like the small order solutions we've already been through, or the zero error program to come in Section 4. These things create instant slack and instant profits, which we can start to invest in a new order of things, including raises and educational and so forth. And we're going to have to start seeing employees as the biggest asset and a permanent asset that we're going to retain so we can put in money in and then get a return down the road as opposed to expecting they're going to jump ship. Of course, the employees are saying, wait a minute, I now realize the company is my dream machine. All those wishes I want, those things don't happen unless I can be part of creating a high-performance ecosystem that's going to float everybody's boat. And for that, I'm going to have to scale up and be responsible. So we should start to see some bottom-up educational initiative and requests. So here is a monthly challenge that I'm going to put out there for all employees working at distribution companies who are watching this video. This next slide gets it across. Take a one-page form. The top half just says, because I want to be a better person, I am going to invest 2 hours or more of my own time outside of work without pay every week on educational enlightenment. It might be company related, but not necessarily so. So then you fill in the blanks as to what you're going to invest your time and energy in. On the bottom half, you just report on a monthly basis how you're progressing. You use this form as a ticket to go in and visit your profit center manager, the person who sort of in a sense hire, fires, gives raises, and say, let's have a bottom-up 12-time job review. So we're not going to have an annual review anymore. Once a month, we're going to have a conversation with our boss, but it's going to be, the agenda is really being set by the employee, where the employee is saying, look, here's where I want to grow to on or off the job. Here's how the company can help me be all that I want to be. And the manager's saying, great, and he's taking notes, or she's taking notes, and trying to remove barriers and help you be what you want to be. Now, If everybody comes in and makes requests, the company may need more resources. Now we start to have a budget for, okay, well, here's how much money we're willing to spend, or other times of resources, time and talent, on helping people, and the best pitches, get funded. The ones that don't may not. But at any rate, it's an exercise that you start to do to create a conversation, but it's being led by the employee who says, I want to grow, I want to believe in myself, I want to invest in myself. So I'm sure this has got a lot of people sort of confused or a little bit panicked. So I've given some extra thought to the discussion questions that will follow watching the video piece of this module. I think the key point, though, is that we all have to grow together in a co-responsible way if the organism, the company, is going to improve to a higher level of performance. That's it. Thanks. In this module, the idea of measuring employee morale is tied into the service retention model, which we referred to a few modules back, and I suspect you don't remember that, so let's go back and look at it. The key slide looks something like this. And in this slide, I know it's very busy, but you'll notice that right at the top is happy employees, and you realize that's the sort of the capstone to everything. If frontline people aren't retained, competent, happy, their hearts, minds, wallets wired into how the company's doing, this whole thing can't work. So now the question is, how do we find out what their morale is? I mean, we could go up and say, hey, frontliner, are you happy? And of course, if I'm the boss, I'm going to go, oh, sure, boss. On a scale from 1 to 10, I'm a 10, always been a 10. They're going to tell me what I want to hear. They're not going to tell me, negative news and so forth. But if I give them an anonymous survey where they can say, okay, on a scale from 1 to 10, how pumped up am I, and so forth, and they know that totally it's going to be anonymous, then there's going to be some good information that might come back. So I went ahead and I experimented on myself. I was turning around a distribution chain, and I had 11 direct reports to me. And so I gave them a simple form, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And it said on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 is, I hate my job, I'm looking for another job as fast as I can find it. 10 is, I can't help myself, I'm down here early in the morning, I'm here late at night, I'm so turned on, I don't want to do anything else except for work. And 5 is, hey, it's a job, I punch in, I punch out, I show up, I shut up, I do what I'm told kind of thing. I'm doing time on a job, it's a paycheck. Where are you on that continuum? And the second question is, where were you 6 months ago? And a third related question was, is there anything that I or the company can do as far as change to help you bump up perhaps a point or two? And then the second part was rate me on a scale from 1 to 10 as far as total effectiveness as a manager. And if it's not a 10, you should write in why not. In fact, I actually think I had 2 columns where it said, what does Bruce do best and what are Bruce's opportunities for improvement? Nice way of saying weaknesses. And so they all filled them out. They all mailed them anonymously back to my secretary, who compiled them all. Then what I did is I turned around and gave out the summary compilation with some additional comments and analysis from myself to them. So I didn't have any problem with saying, here's what everybody said about me and so forth. Here's how they rated me overall. The range was from high to low and the average, etc. And in it, there were a few consensus positives and a few consensus negatives. In other words, if 10 out of 11 guys say, hey, we think you really do this well, you probably do it well. If 1 out of 10 guys says, hey, I think this is cool, well, that's their personal opinion, but it doesn't seem to be scoring well with the masses. So you look at the consensus numbers because there is wisdom there. And in one particular, there were 2 things that right away were negatives, but they were simple things to adjust. And so it looked like I was following up. The people who wrote the surveys were getting, some instant satisfaction, gratification, and indirectly back. And there was one negative where I said, look, that's right. I recognize that as a character flaw, weakness, whatever, and I'm not going to change. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to delegate that to somebody else who really is wired to do that. They're going to be in charge of, touching, hugging, feeling, whatever type of things. Because structurally, that's just going to work better. So after leading by example, I said, now we're going to do it for the people, and I've had 11 direct reports. I'd say 5 of those people then had numbers of people under them. We had a few branch managers, etc. I said, now I want your employees to rate you just as you've done me. And so I put together a total kit. And here in the next few slides is sort of a summary of what we went through. First of all, there was a package for every employee. Joe employee on the outside. They pulled out, there was a letter from me to all employees, which the manager read in a meeting out loud to them. And then they were to look at a form and instantly, right there on the spot, fill it in, fold it up, stick it in a pre-addressed envelope with a stamp on it, etc. And somebody collect them and put them in the mailbox, so it was all done right away, no delay, whatever. And I asked the same things that basically I'd asked on the survey that I'd given to my direct reports. We then, correlated all the numbers. First and foremost, there was a perfect correlation between branch manager or manager effectiveness and employee morale. Those managers who were rated the highest, their employees on average had the highest morale, which just supports one of my golden rules of distribution management. When you have a big chain, you spend a lot of money to make sure you get the very best branch managers, and you just keep them there. I don't believe in promoting hierarchical power, that kind of stuff. In my distribution chains, the branch manager is king, and eventually they become president of that company. I mean, they die there, type of thing, for a lot of reasons that we may come back in later modules. Also, again, there were comments that came up from the troops that weren't necessarily reflections on the branch managers or that branch as much as company policy. And you'd see it from a couple different places, and in a sense they were quick fixes, so we jumped on that right away also. So it was, again, an instant, hey, I filled out a form and something happened, reinforcement. When I shared it back, the results with the branch managers, I would say 20% were, hey, okay, it's kind of interesting, they were sort of cool about it. Frankly, 80% were really on edge. A couple guys were frankly very defensive, hostile. I think to a certain degree they were ashamed of their results. And everybody's reaction is different, so I would have to say it was situational or individual to a large degree. But I just stayed calm and persistent. And I said, look, it's an experiment. And if we go and we look at our North Stars, we are trying to become a high-performance company. Here's the service metric model. We have to have happy employees. How else are we going to get this number back? Do you have any other better alternatives? And usually they say, well, no, as long as we all agree that the North Star is the North Star and we've got to figure out how to get to the brambles to get there, well then, okay, I guess I'm going to hang in there. I gave reassurances. I said, look, relax, don't be defensive. It's just an improvement opportunity. We're not making any absolute judgments here. Things aren't black or white, winners and losers here. And it's a chance to sort of rethink yourself, reconfigure your job, delegate some things. Do you want to coach? What things do you want to work on? Let's look at the positives here and get on with the show. And then the next time I did the survey, I noticed a couple things. First of all, all the scores went up. In other words, the average employee morale score at all locations went up. The average assessment of all the branch managers went up. I mean, that's a very positive, powerful reinforcement that maybe something's working here. I kept the form pretty much the same. Again, my policy of KISS, keep it simple, stupid. But this time I tried something new. I ranked the 7 people who had surveys coming back, but they were just blank numbers. And so I said, gee, on overall effectiveness, you were number 3 out of 7. So you could see the 7 ranked scores there, but you didn't know who the individuals were, except individually they knew they were number 3. And I said, this is, again, it's not some sort of, we're going to give prizes to number 1 and we're in a can number 7 type of thing. It's just to give you some reality perspective. If your handicap is 18, you don't know if it's good or bad unless you realize there are people who are shooting scratch and people are shooting 36. So, again, this is not a big deal. I suppose eventually, if somebody was chronically bad and the same stuff came back and frustration was building in a branch, there'd be a lot of other reasons why it could start to become part of, in a sense, an indictment of why a guy just wasn't fit for a given job. But the initial thrust is just we're all on the path of improvement, and that's the spirit of it. Now, after doing this about 5 to 7 times, and this took over 2 years, because we did it twice a year. So we're looking at over a 2.5-year period of time. And there was a lot of, in the culture, other things going on that were all consistent with getting to our North Stars of high-performance service assumptions and metrics and so forth. you could see that, first of all, the numbers kept trending up. And it wasn't just because of the form, it was because of a lot of the things we were doing. And what happened was the morale or the reaction to the reports improved. It went from 20% being sort of accepting to 80% being, frankly, very eager and anxious to get the results to see how they were doing and keep on the path of improvement. 2 of the original 11 people that directly reported to me by this time, 2.5 years out, had left, but it was for collective reasons. It was for the whole pressure of and culture of the high-performance effort that we were going after. It wasn't just this survey per se, although on the survey I would say they were in the group that was most defensive, most hostile, most resistant to it. And what we're really doing here is going from a autocratic, top-down, kiss my ring, don't get my finger wet, traditional kind of management philosophy style to servant leadership. I'm running around now telling all the frontliners, you're the key. What can I do to help you? How can I serve you? Where do you want me to place my lips, kind of thing. And that, at first gets people all uptight because for years they've been aspiring to achieve, bossdom, leadership, control, power, whatever, in a traditional mindset. It's a difficult transition. But as you start to think about it, what else can you do if you're going to pursue service retention economics? And over time, the managers sort of say, I'm feeling unburdened. It used to be that I was solving all kinds of problems, everybody reverse delegating to me. Now, it's the employees that are feeling burdened. They are slaves to maintaining and achieving those service metrics every day. And when they come with problems, I'll say, well, here's the general objective, and I'm sure you'll figure it out. So we started to get into what we call effective delegation math. So let's look at this next slide. Going down the left-hand side, before, managers were sort of sitting in their office waiting for phones to ring, people were lined up at their door, and they were spending 120% of their time reacting to really, frankly, lots of urgent, on a priority basis, if A is important and D is least important, lots of, C and D kind of things. Most of them were operational deviation problems. Hey, boss, here's an exception. What should I do? Kind of thing. Oh, well, let me know what you're doing. Give me the information. And of course, the employees would give them 50% of the story because the other 50% of the story was kind of stuff you assume the boss might know, etc. So with limited information, a manager makes what they think is a smart decision, but actually because it's not as totally informed as the person right there in the front line, it often is a suboptimal decision, but who's ever going to know or come back and tell the boss he made a mistake? So meanwhile, everybody else is kind of sitting around picking their nose, sort of waiting for the boss to get back to them on what should be done. You now go to the new scenario where the manager, if somebody comes in, they basically put the ball back to them and say, well, I guess I'll help you sort of frame the objective, but you go ask the 5 most important customers what they want or do whatever you have to make sure the service standards happen. So because there's so many North Star metrics that organize people, they can make the decision quickly. We also will get later into a concept called good mistakes, where you say to somebody, look, if you make the wrong decision, someone's going to kick you in the butt, pain will instruct you on how to do it the next time, and quick and dirty, it appears the downside risk and out-of-pocket expenses is reasonably minimal. And that's, if it happens, that's the tuition we pay so you can learn it the next time, because now where we really get a return on this is I'm spending, as a manager, 120% of my time on A items, looking down the road, being very proactive in how we're running this corporation. And you guys are all working 120, 140% hard to make sure your solutions work as best they can, and if they don't, you get up, you try again smarter, et cetera, and you're getting a lot of learning from it. So the total economic is a good one with this kind of delegation. Some summary points. First of all, honest scores, morale scores for employees is vital if you want to keep, retain, and move towards service excellence. Secondly, as you feed these numbers back to the managers, it's very important to do it in a way, in a spirit that does not make them feel they have to be perfect or defensive. The whole thing is just we're on a path. We're just trying to improve. That's all. And then as they try to improve, there are 2 ways to do it. One is structurally, look, there's some things I can do well. I'm going to try to spend more time doing those. And the things I'm not so good at, I don't know that I'm going to change that much in this lifetime. it's kind of athletics. If you have sort of a heavy, spheroid, blocky, muscular, powerful build, you're just not going to be a marathoner in this life. On the other hand, if you're 115-pound birdcage on skinny, long legs and so forth, and you don't have any high twitch fiber, the marathon could be your race. So there are certain things you're just not aptitudinally going to feel good at. So how do we structure the job so that we have a whole brain kind of team that's doing these management duties? And then the other big thing is making sure that we push the operational decisions and duties and responsibilities down as far as we possibly can. Thanks. This is the beginning of section 4 of this video series, and all these modules in 4 are geared towards kind of the chronological progression of how do we find, measure, achieve, sell, then get paid for, and finally leverage basic service brilliance. And the title slide for 4.1 suggests the chronology, but in this particular module we're just going to talk about defining perfect service. To do that, I want to use 2 slides. One you've seen before, but we didn't go into detail, and the other one has some interesting surprises. The first slide, the question is, what is perfect service? We can break that definition into 2 parts, sort of hardcore measurable reality numbers, and then sort of softer human interaction stuff, which is on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, looking at measurable standards, in physical goods distribution, universals, I don't care what kind of distribution channel you're in, a first and typically most important thing is availability. So here we're saying, for a customer, do we have a breadth, a one-stop shopping assortment that they want? So then with one phone call, they can order everything they want. And the second part of availability is it currently in stock? So what are our measurable fill rates today vis-a-vis the next best competitive alternative? If we have it, the next issue becomes 0 errors. Can we just execute the order and get the right stuff to the right place at the right time with the right paperwork, right pricing, that kind of thing? Then comes the issue of on-time delivery or response time. Now, on-time delivery and response time will vary by niche. So if we jump over to the segment peculiarity column, that's where you start to see differences as far as what the niche wants. You also will see that with availability. In other words, you may sell 3, 4, 5 different segments of customers, but each one of them needs a different one-stop shop and assortment. They may each have 80, 90% overlap with each other, but it's the last 5, 10, 15% of the gizmos they need that's peculiar to what they're doing that makes you a sort of a specialty distributor for them or that niche. Once you have on-time delivery, you can say, well, can we speed it up, but not to the point where you're disservicing them, you're giving them service faster than they really want or can deal with or will pay for. If there are mistakes, how well and quickly we cure mistakes is big. And then if we make mistakes, it causes the customer time, inconvenience, extra paperwork costs, downtime costs. It's a hassle. And so there's the issue of how do we compensate them for their hassle. So those are universals for all distribution channels. You just have to kind of tweak them, not just for the channel, but then tweak them for individual segments you may go after. On the right-hand side, as far as service and counter, we'll come back, over the distance of section or section 4 of this video to address these things. But right off the bat, there's no substitute for having extroverted, empathetic, feeling people on inside sales desks, for example, who really they're good listeners. They can feel, share the pain of the customer or their concern or their anxiety. They pick up on those kind of things. Also, as we start to try to provide more heroic service for target and franchise accounts, to have a little bit of flexibility, to know when to bend the rules and so forth, that takes a little bit of judgment and ingenuity also, as opposed to some people can be very rigid. It's all or nothing, black or white, this is the way the deal is. And later on, of course, we'll have separate segments alone on heroic recoveries and gift exchanges. So let's look at the next slide. What we're going to do is take the universals measurements we just saw, and we're going to dig a little deeper. And if we said to a buyer, what's the logical priority order of these elements, they'd say, well, I need them all. And since I need them all, why bother to say one's more important than the other? But there is sort of a certain building reality. Because if we start with fill rates and we don't have the stuff today, what good is 0 errors on-time delivery if we don't have it? What we're saying is we don't have it, call the competition, and if they do, maybe you'll call them ever after type of thing. Secondly, if we have it, 0 errors becomes the next most important thing, because if you get it here in time, but it's the wrong stuff, that doesn't count. Then you could get down to price and terms. In other words, okay, all things being equal, I want a lower price. But that's assuming that everybody has exactly the same fill rate, 0 errors, and on-time delivery, perhaps unconditionally guaranteed, which isn't the case in most distribution channels and competitive rivalries. So if somebody says, well, I don't have it in stock, but I've got a low price, that's empty. So buyers will say, you're right, I have to have the first 3 before then I can make an issue of price and terms. But if everybody is sort of nebulous, average, mediocre, undifferentiated as far as the first 3, maybe price and terms become more important. Then you can ask, well, wait a minute, what about heroic recoveries? And what about heroic service? In other words, you're in a jam, you call up and you ask for a favor. Where does that fit in? They'd say, oh, well, yeah, the truth of the matter is that still is probably more important than price and terms. Then you say, what about inside sales, the quality, availability of those people, all their marketing support services, outside salespeople? And in surveys done every 10 years in distribution channels, it's interesting to see that the value of the outside salesperson has dropped from the #1 spot in 1970 to the 7th spot in by the early 1990s. And inside sales has drifted higher. And of course, you can understand there might be some reasons for this, but it still doesn't, still when you ask buyers what % of salespeople are truly worth seeing, truly build your bottom line, for all industries, all channels and so forth, you'll see about 10-15% of the outside salespeople are rated as, bottom line profit builder, valuable kinds of people. So the question is, well, who are those people, the top 10-15%, and why can't the other 85% figure that out and in a sense improve their act to be that, so that both they and the exceptional inside salespeople can actually move themselves back up above price, where they're able to get last look and a little bit more just for themselves. So that still is a possibility. But let's look at let's discuss this outside sales thing a little bit further. I think first of all, to put these surveys in perspective, when you go and ask a buyer logically what you want, they're going to give you one answer. But they're irrational human beings. If you said, well, what if you're in a real jam and your line is your bonus or your job or something is on the line, or you're going to make or break a big customer if you can't get the right product, who are you going to call? They go, oh, I'm going to call my sales guy. So in moments of crisis, all of a sudden I think the sales guy is a lot more valuable. So logically that's one thing, but we have to realize humans are irrational, and so that puts it a little bit more up in the air. Secondly, if a salesperson can go out and get last look and the customer says meet the price, in one sense I could say, well, that's too bad because the salesperson isn't getting last look and a premium for themselves. However, it's 2/3 of a victory, because for starters, the salesperson and the horse they're riding have made it to the finals. It's between them and perhaps 1 or 2 other people. And they have been offered last look. So all things being equal, they would like to do business with the salesperson and that salesperson's company. But as a vision that we'd like to aspire to, that's what we'd love to be able to say in that moment of truth. We look the customer in the eye and say, well, yeah, but there's one thing you can get from my company you can't get anywhere else, and that's me. And I would like to remind you of things I have done individually, heroically, especially extra, over the last X months that have saved you, saved your company, saved different things that in one way or another have put money to your bottom line. And now it's payback time. I want last look, and I want a fraction of my incremental action that I've generated for you in the form of a 1% more. And a second issue is the horse I'm riding. Because our fill rates are so good, and some items are unconditionally guaranteed as far as fill rates, because our 0 errors are unconditionally guaranteed, because our on-time delivery is unconditionally guaranteed, this is how this periodically saves you money, time, stress, etc. It's why it allows you to consolidate your shopping time, your paperwork with us. And for that, we deserve last look and a little bit more. Sure, our price is higher, but when you look at the other 10 elements of total procurement cost, our service brings those down significantly more than the price went up, so it's still the best deal. So just give me that order with an extra 2%. And you just look them in the eye and they go, oh, okay. Now that's not necessarily the way it will happen, but that's a vision that we want to stick with for right now. Here's some key summary points. First of all, we'll have more good service encounters. Remember on the perfect service definition slide on the right-hand side, where it's care, flexibility. How can you care and have flexibility if your people are on hold all day long as you're taking care of zillions of small customers who are giving you money losing small orders? If you have put in the small order program effectively, and you've shaped up or shipped out a lot of customers, you're going to start to have a little bit more free time and slack that allows you to be a little bit more flexible and creative, and because you strategically know who the 5, 10, 15 accounts are, franchise and target, you're going to make those things kind of happen. It's not any different than when I dial a special 800 number for the executive platinum frequent flyer guys at American Airlines. I mean, I'm embarrassed once not to say I've flown way past 5 million miles with American Airlines. So when I call up, they already have my number, they know my whole story, and anything's possible. They'll give me whatever I want. Well, I like that, but if the inside salespeople are just taking lots of calls, they have to have methods to know who to differentiate their efforts for and have a little bit of slack, and that'll happen. Secondly, the modules that follow, 4.2 to 5, we're going to talk about how to measure and improve fill rates, which is the keystone to basic great service. If we don't have it, the rest of the story is kind of empty. And then the modules after that will get into why we need a part-time new creature called a service manager, who will then help to be a catalyst for making zero errors, on-time delivery, and heroic recoveries happen. Thanks. In this module, you'll notice from the slide, the title slide, I'm just taking the different measurable elements of basic service brilliance, sort of a definition, and putting a box around the topic of the module. So this first one's got a box around fill rates, and then we're going to go to zero errors and so forth. On fill rates, what we're really asking the customer or telling the customer when it comes to fill rates is, yes, we have what you want, or no, we don't have it today, so why don't you hit your second speed dial button and go to our head-to-head competitor, and if they have it, maybe next time you'll just call them first. So when it comes to defection rates, who keeps customers back and forth, having a fill rate day in, day out that runs X% better than a competitor can be a huge edge as far as making all the other economics of service retention happen. We're also looking at transactional cost economics. We remember from the small order series that if we have higher fill rates, we will have larger average order sizes. We'll have fewer split shipments where we ship some now, the balance later on, or worse yet, the balance from another branch. So the economics of this are very important. First, I want to talk about how to define fill rates. There really are two ways. You could define, frankly, my bias is to measure them both ways every day on all categories of items, but you can measure them by lines on an invoice filled, or you can measure by dollars that ordered filled. So for example, a customer gives us a $500 order and involving 5 line items. A line item could be, send me 6 red widgets. Another line item could say, send me 4 blue ones. So when we say, well, we have 5 blue widgets and you want 6, that line item is not filled. That's a 0 for that line item. Although you could say, well, I had 5/6 of the dollars he ordered. In the long run, the fill rates by dollars and the fill rates by line items will correlate pretty closely. My bias is still to favor lines filled, because I want to say I have it or I don't, as far as a line item, because typically they need to do something with that item. But it's do both. As far as the importance of fill rates, there are some businesses where fill rates is just not a competitive issue. If there are very few stock, think of an Anheuser beer distributor. The guy shows up in a truck in the parking lot of a liquor store or a grocery store or a convenience store. They'll have 100% fill rates off the truck on items that at the last minute the customer wants to add to or subtract. So because there's so few stock keeping units, they turn over so high, and the substitutions are pretty easy. Well, if you don't have this, they'll buy the bottles today kind of thing. And really, what's your choice? There's an exclusive distributorship for Anheuser-Busch, so you can't get the beer from anybody else. At the other extreme, fill rates become absolutely most important if you have 30, 60, 80, 100,000 stock keeping units. They're very low turns. There are no substitutes. If you need a certain part for fixing a Toyota, you need that part. There may not be a substitute. And you need it now, because if you can't get it now, a mechanic can't bill out at $80 an hour, and a customer is going to be upset at the end of the day because they can't get their car back and they're renting a car in the meantime. So obviously auto parts, quick response, C-store kind of models live and die on their fill rates. And you have to decide on a spectrum where you are. But most of the durable goods distributors who have a magnitude of 5,000 or more SKUs are going to start to be down at the right-hand end with the auto parts people. Here's a case study of how fill rates could be measured. You might say we want to target an overall fill rate of 92%. And the way you do this is you get into the mathematics of what is called safety stocks and figuring out demand during lead time and lead times for manufacturers. And you have to define what an A-plus item is based on picks per year down to a D. I'm not going to get into that in this module. Just know that when it comes to A-plus items, which are the top 20, 50, 100 fastest moving items out of your 10,000 items or whatever you have, they are disproportionately hugely important. And as a general rule, like grocery stores, to be out of milk, eggs, and butter is just dumb. Don't do it. And you may even want to unconditionally guarantee you're going to have the top 10, 15, 20 items. And then you can ratchet it down where on D items you have no safety stock at all, so in theory you're going to have only 50% fill rates, although it'll run higher because you order a case of these things from the manufacturer, which is 8, and you sell 4 a year. So if you're either going to have it and get 2 turns, a half a turn every year, or you don't have the item at all. So I find that even if you have no safety stocks for D items, you're going to run higher than 50% because they come packed more than you'd really like to buy from the suppliers. Now some people might say, well, wait a minute, democratically the customer doesn't care if it's a D or an A-plus item. To them, everything's an A-plus item. But there's a competitive reality. If a customer calls me and I don't have a D item, they're going to call my competition, and the odds are they're not going to have it either. But if I don't have an A-plus item and they call the competition, the odds are any competitor can have the A-plus. So I tend to weight my dollars towards the high end so I don't give my competitors a chance to have something I don't have if the competitor gets the second call. Now, if you decide 92% is a good number, how do you come up with that number? And the point is that it's sort of a relative phenomenon. It depends on what the customer's next best supply alternative is. If you're in Elephant Breath, Montana, and the next best alternative is to call somebody in Chicago, and it's going to take 3 days and extra freight to get it, then you may have 50% fill rates on a local basis, and you win by default. You're sort of the only show in town if you need it in the next day or two, and they'll take whatever substitution and price you want to foist on them. If, on the other hand, you are in Chicago and there are a lot of competitive distributors who all have the same brand name, line item kind of things that you have, and they're all going after your same number one niche, then you've got to figure out who the best, toughest competitors are for that niche, and make sure your fill rates are equal to or better than theirs. You also have to look at how valuable your fill rates are to the customer. That's the spectrum where it goes from Anheuser-Busch beer distributor to auto parts. And you may strategically decide to make a greater investment in fill rates for some foreseeable amount of time to establish that service excellence keystone. Now, if you decide that 92% is a magic number because you think your competition's at 85, or you're at 98 because your competition is 92, whatever you're targeting and you think you're getting at your company, the actual fill rates are below that because there are ways that the employees consciously or unconsciously game the system, and customers also, in a sense, will check to see if you have it. If you don't have it, they'll go somewhere else, and so you don't actually get an order that suggests that there was not a fill rate. And the only way to know what it really is to go to your core customers, your target franchise accounts, and see if you can't get them to basically give you first call for everything they want, and make sure it all gets entered in the computer, even if you don't have code numbers for it, to come up with blank dummy code numbers to start to capture how well you really are servicing the heart of the number one niche you're going after. In this next slide, we get into some of the ways that fill rates are overrated. We don't follow through correctly on customer inquiries, substitutes and conversions, interbranch split shipments, buying it from the outside, etc. Let's go into some of these things in detail. For example, if a customer calls up and says, I want a certain product cut to a certain size. I remember, for example, in the printing paper distribution business, you can get large sheets of paper and you can cut them down to smaller sizes. So if somebody wants 8.5 by 11 paper of a certain size, and you don't have it in 8.5 by 11, but you have 11 by 17 or 23 by 35, you can actually cut these down with not a lot of scrap into 8.5 by 11, repack them and ship them to the customer. Well, if you're cutting down paper and you're showing demand for the large size sheets of paper, you keep ordering the large size of pieces of paper, but you don't show demand for 8.5 by 11, and it could be ordered pre-cut from the mill 8.5 by 11. So the trick is, when you do any conversions from parent sizes to sizes that can be ordered, you have to show demand for the small sizes that can be ordered, so you start to order that stuff in advance as opposed to having to do on-site conversion, which isn't necessary. If a customer calls up and says, hey, I need this odd item, do you have it? And you say, well, no, we don't. But they say, okay, fine, buy. What we're supposed to say to inside sales is, wait a minute. If we did, would you give me the order and anything else with it? And often you'll hear, oh, yes, I actually have 4 items to buy. 3 are commodities, and 1 is an oddball item. But because there are minimum orders or there is freight prepayment, I want to consolidate my orders with a guy that has it all, so I start with the oddball item. So since you don't have it, I'm going to give the whole order to somebody else who has the oddball item. We're supposed to capture all of that as demand from the customer and put that into the computer to show that next time, we should have some more of the oddball item. And so again, the guy was going to test our fill rates, but it was an unfair test. So those are the kind of things. Now, when it comes to getting an edge on your fill rates, one thing I like to think about is what I call the Las Vegas edge factor, where if you went to play roulette, there are 38 slots on the big wheel. They pretend kind of like they're really 36. You can bet on 1 to 36, but there is 0 and 00, which are green, and the other 36 numbers are split into red and black. So if you bet on red, the odds are 50-50. But when the little ball falls in 0 and 00, the house says, okay, we're taking in all the chips. Otherwise, we pay out whatever the odds are, assuming we had 36 slots. Well, 2 slots out of 38 slots is 5.26% of the slots. And that's the house's edge. And that's all they need is a 5% edge in 10, 15, 20 minutes to wipe most people out at roulette. So you have to realize in the service execution business, you take the most critical thing like fill rates, and you figure out how to get them higher and measure them more accurately and have what local customers want, and you get that 5% edge. Over time, it can make a huge difference. Thank you. This module is on improving fill rates, and it's going to be longer than most. I apologize, and I think all our employees, frontliners, could appreciate some of the concepts, but it's going to be more of a buyer's management kind of tool or session. And there are some concepts I'm going to have to just glance over, but try to back up in the implementation guide. When you try to improve fill rates, I think an important difference is to, again, be customer-centric over being supplier-centric. Suppliers are always trying to load you up with more inventory and want you to stock the whole line, whether your customer niche is buy the whole line or not. And what you want to do is put your precious inventory dollars into supporting highest fill rates for that number 1 niche versus your number 2 biggest competitor for that niche, trying to get that Las Vegas edge of 5.28% like they have in roulette. If you're thinking about going to a number 1 niche customer, well, if you go to a number 1 niche customer and say, let me see your folders of purchase orders for miscellaneous. In other words, I don't need to see the folder of my biggest head-to-head competitor and what you're buying from them, but do you have miscellaneous suppliers, the 50% of the suppliers you buy from and only 10% of your items. And if you look through those and you compare the top 10 customers in a given niche, you'll find that 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 out of 10 of them are all buying the same miscellaneous items. And if the central key buyer for your product line is buying those items, that suggests that maybe you should put those in stock, but not necessarily buying them from the manufacturers direct, but buying just cases from a different kind of wholesaler to sort of round out your offering of one-stop shopping for a given niche. Also, when you go after very large target franchise accounts, they may say, well, look, I don't want just good fill rates, I want you to special stock stuff for me. And to a certain degree, this is a price cut. It's a concession to get the business from that customer. But to make sure out of sight isn't out of mind, I would recommend that if you put special stock in for a customer, you double tag it in the master file for the item master for that inventory item, so that periodically, maybe every quarter, you can pull off the items that were special stock by customer, print out how many you have on hand, put a value on a full list or whatever the customer would pay for it, and then total that to show, all right, Mr. Customer, you asked us to put in an extra $1,500 of inventory, or pick a number, and here's what we have on hand, here's what you bought in the last quarter or didn't buy, just wanted to let you know it's there if and when you need it. So you're starting to sort of bank goodwill brownie points, and that really is part of the icing you do to get the rest of the business. Now, some suppliers might be upset with you when you say, look, I'm cherry picking your line because I am gearing it towards my number one customer niche. But you have to point out that if you are successful and you grow 2 to 5 times faster than the industry growth rate because you are so good at getting, keeping, not losing, winning the service retention game and blowing the roof off key accounts of the whole future, then very quickly suppliers are going to go, you don't stock my whole line, but you're growing faster on average each year than any of my other distributors, and you pay your bills like a slot machine. I love you, man. So you find short-term there could be some resistance, but longer-term they're going to love you because you're going to grow faster and pay your bills. Another key concept is, as you think about improving your fill rates, you want to try to bootstrap your way to something which I call critical mass economics. Also, as you improve fill rates, you can do it at 3 levels of effectiveness. There are things you can do operationally starting tomorrow in the warehouse and with inside sales. There are things that you can do at the purchasing level, and then there are things you can do at the logistical level. If you have 2 or more locations that do interbranch shipping, or a main warehouse with satellite outlets. So we'll look at each one of those in this module. As far as critical mass, this is sort of as much art as science, but basically what you do here is you pick a customer niche in a geographic market. You then say, for that customer niche, what is the approximate number of stock keeping units I need to have to provide a one-stop shopping array of items? Is it 50,000 items? Is it 50 items? And then, so that's the breadth of the line you have to have. Then the next thing is the depth of investment. How many dollars do I have to put into inventory so that my fill rates on this one-stop shopping are equal to or higher than my next biggest head-to-head competitor? So you say, gee, I got to have $800,000, or pick, you're coming up with some gee whiz number now. $800,000, let's just say, of inventory to have one-stop shopping, highest fill rates in this geographic market service. Next, you have to say, well, what margin percent can I get? Because the marketplace is going to determine your margin percent. In spite of authorized, suggested list prices from manufacturers, supply and demand is going to set margin percents for commodity items and so forth. And those margin percents are going to vary by plus or minus 5 to 10%. So if the average is 20, some guys will get 22, some guys will get 18, 17, depending if they get great service or terrible service. So service advantage will give some swing there. Once you figure out the margin, you have to look at how many turns do you have to get on that inventory so the turn earn gives you enough return on your investment to make the $800,000 investment worthwhile. You can that way back into, on a model basis, what the annual sales are that you're going to need to have to turn the inventory enough times to get enough margin to make it all work. And that would be what I call critical mass. By example, drug wholesalers may have to have about 50,000 stock keeping units, which that's the breadth. The investment may be about $10 million to have really high competitive fill rates. They have to turn it 7 to 20 times. And a lot of the products they sell, particularly the pills, are very valuable per pound, so you can ship them greater distances, and they're bigger average order sizes for a lot of reasons in that channel. What that adds up to is in a big marketplace, you'll have one, maybe two drug distribution centers. You have a third one, that third guy can't get to critical mass because they can't get $80 million at cost out of a warehouse, out of that market, because there are one or two other guys that already have such a large market share. At the other extreme, the critical mass economics for a janitorial supply distributor, particularly what I would call a redistributor, are very low. You could have as few as 1,000 stock-keeping units and have about $50,000 to $100,000 of inventory and get 5 to 10 turns on product that's pretty bulky. A lot of it's just towels and tissue, or commodity chemicals that just it's glorified water you're shipping around. And a lot of the people you sell are contractors who tend to want to run in and pick stuff up at the last minute. So you have to have that C-store local presence capability. So the barriers to entry to get into that business are a lot lower, and to bootstrap yourself to critical mass economics is presumably easier, but maybe not, because there's so many guys trying to do it. I saw one electrical wholesale distribution chain where in particular they had a branch where the turns were abominable. I said, the turns are stink, they're doing a terrible job of inventory. And I actually looked at the branch and realized all their inventory is very clean, A and B items. The problem was not that they had too much inventory, the problem was they didn't have enough sales because they were trying to be all things to 5 different segments of customers, and they didn't have enough sales for any one of them to turn a one-stop shopping assortment. So to sort of rethink their business and figure out in that marketplace, given who's already there and who owns the dominant share in the different niches, where was their best niche shot? And once we reformulated and super focused that area, we did fine and got it to a very profitable branch. Some comments on, assuming you want to raise fill rates, one niche at a time. At the operational level, the biggest thing to do, I think, is to try to do same-day receiving on inventory. What happens when buyers buy more stuff, they're buying A and B items. They're not buying C's and D's because they don't sell. They're still there. In fact, you get to count the D items every year at physical inventory time. So when stuff's arriving, it's mostly more milk and eggs and bread. And if 3 truckloads hit the dock in the afternoon, and we have one guy who's going to take a week to sort of systematically receive all that, put it away, and get it in the computer to make it available for order picking and higher fill rates on orders and higher payload per stop of a truck, then it would make sense to put it all away that night. And you say, well, we can't do that because we only have one guy that knows how to do it, and also we don't want to burn overtime because overtime costs more than regular time, so we're being penny wise and pound foolish on the labor front when we realize we're getting killed on the service excellence, retention, order size economics front. So my bias is to cross-train as many people as necessary in the warehouse so that if a surge of receiving comes in, the whole gang is going to tackle that and put it away the same day. I don't care if they get it put away by midnight or they come in at 5 in the morning and it's put in and in the computer by 7 when we start pulling orders for the counter or the daily orders. But I want to see those fill rates pop on those A+ and A items dramatically because the stuff's been received. Other things that can be done as far as improving fill rates. In a case number 1, and we talked about this a little bit in the last module, where customers are calling saying, do you have an odd item? We say, no, we don't. They say goodbye. We're supposed to say, wait a minute, hold the phone. If we did have it, will we get the order? Yes, we would. Okay, we're going to enter all that stuff. Another variation of that is somebody calls up and says, I need 10 widgets, but we only have 6. Can we say, could I ship you 6 complete? In other words, are you ordering this for stock? Because if you are, I'll ship you 6. When you get down to your order point, call up and order another 10. So don't back order a small order and create 2 transactional activities for both you and the customer. They say, no, I need all 10 for doing something right now. Then we could say, all right, how about substitutions? Because again, we don't want to have split shipments and double transactional activity. It would be better to take another item, perhaps a higher priced quality item, and give them a discount on that item to make sure the order is shipped 10 units so they can get the job done. If we do that, though, we want to make sure the demand in the computer doesn't go for the premium items, but it goes for the commodity items. Otherwise, we'll keep ordering more premium items and ordering less commodity items when we need to order more commodity items. So the question is true demand recorded there. Other examples, you don't have what the customer wants, you say, but we can bring it in from another branch. And that's fine, but if you track the path of replenishment, the branch that ships it should not show that as demand. They should just reduce the inventory, and it should show as demand at the branch that received it and shipped it out. Otherwise, we'll keep ordering at the other branch and shipping it over, creating repetitive transactional costs, split shipments, and so forth. When you have new items and you put them in stock, you're going to find out that you try to round out the niche offering. So that effectively helps you improve fill rates for that niche. In fact, it's kind of like the icing that goes in the cake. But here you have to be careful when you do that, because some of these items may fragment. You go to one central buyer and they buy one-stop shopping plus these other items. There are a lot of central buyers that do the same thing. It works. But at small accounts, you may find one guy buys two categories of items. A little bit bigger, it splits. They're two separate buyers. So now the separate buyer is going to buy the oddball items and a lot of other oddball items that come from a different kind of wholesaler. So you want to be careful that you're making sure that all your customers are buying these oddball items in the same way, because then that's a way of rounding out your offering and improving your fill rates. Now, selling what we stock as opposed to selling what customers might want to buy. Here's a case study. Allegiance is the country's largest hospital supply distributor. They have sold out now, and they're part of Cardinal Health. But when they were being spun out from Baxter International, they had to do an internal turnaround, and they found out at that point they had 100,000 stock keeping units in the system. The bottom 50,000 items only accounted for 1% of the sales. They had as many as 17 different types of bedpans that you would use in hospitals from different manufacturers. They said, this is crazy. If we really said about what's the number 1, 2, 3 most popular bedpan, or what's good, better, best, how do we boil this down to fewer stock keeping units that are coming from the suppliers that we think are number one in this niche, are going to be an ascending, strong number 1 or number 2. If they're a 3, 4, 5 marginal person who comes with private label, low discount prices and so forth, it's tempting. But in the long run, those guys may fall by the wayside, be consolidated, rolled up. Let's put our money where we think the long term is going to be, and let's go out and sell what we stock and not put in what the customer thinks they might want to buy. The flip side of this coin is manufacturers come and say, hey, I've got a 17th kind of bedpan, and it's a little bit different because it's made a little bit different material, or it doesn't make as much noise when it hits the floor. Gosh knows what the gimmick is. And they offer you an incredible set of deals and bribes to basically spiff it through your business and into some customers who then start to buy it on a repeat basis. To now close that out makes the salespeople edgy, because they're saying, well, I went out there and got this guy to buy it, now we're turning around saying we're not going to stock it, I don't want to do that. But the truth is, we have to have the discipline to say no to the temptations from these redundant extra manufacturers up front, because we have a fill rate strategy and we want to park our business with the manufacturers are going to survive in the long run. Some quick comments on cash traps. If you start measuring excess stock and dead items, one of the reasons we tend to have excess stock is we want to buy a truckload to get a big price, but we don't have enough volume throughput through that particular warehouse to really support a truckload. That's where we really should buy from a redistributor or a master distribution center in assorted cases. So what happens is our earn goes down because we're not buying direct at the lowest truckload price. But the trick is, will the turns go up more than the earn? And more importantly, because we're ordering on a more frequent assorted basis, we have better fill rates. So if you get a higher turn earn and fill rates, then you're better to do a redistribution business within your own distribution web or buying from a master wholesaler that may exist in your particular channel. As far as dead items, my philosophy is write them off sooner rather than later. Let's take our dose of reality, but that's remedial. Preventatively, what are we going to do so that future new items come in, they are really screened much more carefully and they're sold in a much more focused way, and we have an upfront contract with the manufacturers that if they don't sell, we can return them with no penalties and so forth. So think preventatively there as opposed to just remedially. And lastly, at a logistics level, two concepts. One is an interbranch service system. If you have a truck that goes from 2 warehouses, 3 warehouses, 4 warehouses, and I've seen trucks that have gone through to 5 warehouses through the night, that trucking can be used as 2 ways. It can be a service fill rate tool If that's the case, it has to go every day around a circuit from the biggest stock location to the smallest one. Preferably it goes at night so that if a customer orders something at the end of the day from a little warehouse downstream, it's as though they can look at all upstream inventory and know that that's going to be in their warehouse ready to go the next morning. So that's an elaborate strategy, but it can really work beautifully if you're in a high density, you're Los Angeles, you've got umpteen locations kind of thing. At the other extreme, you're just using it as a purchasing tool. You buy stuff into the major warehouse, and then you use trucks to replenish satellite branches as a purchasing tool. Then don't go every other day, go every 2 weeks, and have the branches set the reorder points, reorder quantities that way. Don't go every other day, because then it's not a service fill rate tool, and you're overdoing the purchasing redistribution tool. Here are the key points for this show. You want to improve your fill rates with strategic intent. That means you're being customer-centric as opposed to supplier-centric, but the suppliers will like you in the long run because you're going to grow faster and pay your bills anyway. You also are letting the top 5, 10 most, the heart of your niche customers sort of guide you as to what new items to put in the warehouse, often miscellaneous items that you come from redistributors. Secondly, operationally, you cross-train your warehouse guys to do same-day receiving on stuff because that will improve your fill rates out of that warehouse markedly. Inside salespeople need to have some slack time to spend more time with the customers who are ordering to capture true demand and make sure it gets into the computer as opposed to, I'm so busy, if they say I don't have it and they say goodbye, then we let it go. And then our computer's not getting smart. We keep making the same dumb restocking errors. Fourth point, sell what you stock and what the top 10 niche customers need from somewhere else, as opposed to trying to be too many things to too many people. And lastly, keep an eye on the concept of critical mass and figure out how if you ever can get to critical mass in that particular marketplace. Because if you can't, cut your losses sooner or merge, sell with somebody else that you can get to critical mass. But if you think you can get there, then come up with a strategy to bootstrap your way there. Thank you.